If you knew me before, you wouldn't even look my way. If I had the nerve to speak, you wouldn't hear what I say. Time has come and gone so fast, we're not who we used to be.
Well, welcome back to Sullivan's Unheard Voices, everybody. So Olivia wants to toy around the idea of starting her own podcast. And so I was like, it's time for me to do an interview again. And so thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And by all means, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Definitely been toying around with the idea. I tend to crack people up when I'm at work, and a good friend of mine was kind of recommending I should check this out and see if it's something to pursue. And the first person came to mind was you, Shawn. So thank you for having me on, and bear with me. Still working through the nerves. So if I crack more jokes, we're just getting settled in. So yeah.
It's all good.
But yeah, and I thought I would practice interviewing just to kind of see what the feel is like. And I wanted to get your perspective. You were telling me about, let's see, at a young age, you started to realize some kind of certain remarks from a biracial perspective. And I would love to hear your take on it.
I appreciate that because, one of the questions I get frequently is around, and I never knew how to describe it, right? Other than, I legit have heard people well, how is it that you as a white person are so understanding of all cultures?
Mm-hmm.
And it really goes back to childhood and realizing now
Mm-hmm.
that even though I present white, I never was allowed in white spaces.
Oh, please tell me more.
So-
I'd love to learn about your background and dive a little more into that for me.
Yeah. So my father, so I guess we'll start sort of at a young age, because my mom passed when I was 10.
Okay.
And my mom was the sort of white side of the family. My dad has this sort of identity crisis being Native,
Mm-hmm.
but we really did talk in that native language. So we had a different cadence to our voices. We had a different sort of cadence and approach to things. And also being the not so wealthy kid on campus, wearing the same clothes all the time, not having sort of that area. So I was always the sort of poor kid who was misunderstood, that nobody ever reached out to. And I realized fairly quickly in school that I didn't really feel like I belonged anywhere. And so because I didn't really feel like I belonged anywhere, I just sort of sat back and just watched different cultures and how they engaged in the world. And one of the spaces that I learned fairly quickly is in white spaces. Because if you don't use their language, you don't say the same things that they say, they know right off the bat that you're not welcome here. And kids could be harsh when they find out that your dad doesn't look like their dad. And so I had a childhood that was full of just being, and not knowing I was autistic at the time, just being misunderstood and always knowing what that felt and never wanting anybody else to feel that way at my hand. It doesn't feel good.
It doesn't. That's a really deep beginning to the conversation. I really appreciate being vulnerable. And I want to ask you a little bit about when you say the word belonging, what makes you feel that you were in a welcomed environment? Just tell me a little bit about that.
You mean currently or?
Oh, then and currently, how can you tell?
Then I don't know. I never really felt like I belonged. I mean, I had my sort of misfit friends, a handful, 5 or 6, that we just sort of all were on the periphery, on the outside looking in. And I guess what welcoming kind of felt like me was that one-on-one time where it was very rarely did I ever get invited to a party or over to anyone's house. It was almost impossible. And then on the flip side, anytime I would invite somebody over to my house and they would meet my dad, it would be the last time they ever talked to me. And this was something that repeated itself over and over and over again.
Oh my goodness.
And so up until the military, I really never felt like I belonged in any space. Because I don't know, I was just sitting, I almost felt like I was in a world where I knew the words, but I didn't understand the language.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of knew the proxemics, but I didn't know the code.
Mm-hmm.
And with my dad never being around and never teaching me anything about how to interact with other people,
Mm-hmm.
I was basically this feral kid who didn't know anything about like modern real society. And it stemmed to, and it put up barriers in all kinds of strange places, like
Mm-hmm.
trying to find jobs and all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of aspects, because like I didn't quite know the code.
Would you also say it maybe gave you a sense of strength in a time of adversity, like overcoming something that, I mean, these are never planned. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But when you reflect on it too, like what strengths would you say came out of it?
A lot. I have a different mentality on life.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up not attached to any values or any sort of support structure kind of gives you this opportunity to be a free agent.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not attached to anything as part of my identity.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be like the model that I want to be, but then if some information comes along,
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk about the gay piece in
Mm-hmm.
a moment, but when something comes along that sort of shifts your worldview,
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to adjusting my frame of reference, because like, who am I to say I'm the end all be all of knowing like, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always had this philosophy, like I will change if more information comes available.
That's actually really empowering. And I wonder, with your perspective on this, when you're engaging with, because what you're demonstrating for me is a very strong cultural perspective, very welcoming of all walks of life, all differences, and it's that love that you have that you're showing people of humanity.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, like with that all in itself, I mean, to this day, how would you describe your sense of belonging?
That's a tough question, because about 80% of the time I still don't feel like I belong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even when I'm in certain spaces,
Mm-hmm.
you can still feel that there's this level of I'm outside of this group.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a brief moment in time, they welcome you into the club,
Mm-hmm.
as long as it sort of suits their needs. And then when you don't sort of fit their needs, they kind of tend to go away and never come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always sort of searching for spaces where I belong. And I guess I would say the spaces I feel the most belonging are in those support group spaces with other people on the autism spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
because I can let my guard down and I can let my mask down and I can actually just talk
Mm-hmm.
like me.
And that was the other question I was going to ask. It's like, who do you welcome and feel belongs in your social circle, belongs with, who would you give quality time to? I made a challenge. Embrace yourself, sir.
No, and I appreciate that
Yeah.
perspective, right? Any opportunity I have for self-reflection and deep thought, I'm always for it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like the barrier to be on the podcast, you have to be kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I want people around me that will accept me and my limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you expect me to call you every other day, that ain't never going to be me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you expect me to like on a hat do like verbal communication, and you're not accepting of the fact that some weeks I just can't,
Mm-hmm.
then I can't have you in my circle, because like I need you to understand that while I would love to be normal, if you will, I have a battery limit.
Mm-hmm.
And that battery limit is usually runs out at 3 p.m. every day.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep pushing anyway, because like I feel like if I'm not here to give my voice, then nobody is sort of out there
Mm-hmm.
giving that sort of perspective that I'm giving.
Well, and what I'm hearing is you've got a strong perspective on your boundaries,
Yeah.
what you can give, what you can't, and that's not a bad thing. That's a really strong quality, that strong awareness.
And at the same time, though, I can tell on the other side when people really want to be closer in my circle,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I literally only can have a certain number of friends on my friend list
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm sacrificing something else for something else. And so there, a lot of times I see the disappointment on the face, like, oh, I want to be best friends with you. And I'm like, I would love to, but like, I'm sorry. Like, I only have 3 spoons. But how do you tell people that? You know?
Yeah, don't play card games with me and spoons. Let's remember that lesson, right?
You got it.
I got pretty aggressive. We're a bunch of savages at the table, in case you don't realize this. But no, it's, honestly, what you're highlighting on is a lot of what a lot of people struggle with when it comes to addressing their own self-awareness.
Yeah.
Actually being honest and saying like, I'm really good with this quality time. This is where my limits are, and this is the where I'm going to keep being my best. And people who want to keep pushing you and stretching you, is that really a good quality friendship?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's actually something that I hope that you walk away knowing that this is a really strong quality and not something to look as a weakness. While others might perceive it, maybe it's just time for them to kind of take that self-reflection, realize, are you doing the same approach for yourself?
And I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like doing the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to fill a few of my own needs
Mm-hmm.
to refill my cup,
Mm-hmm.
because like I always want to be able to be social and a social butterfly.
Mm-hmm.
You throw more than 2 people in the mix, my brain goes haywire.
Mm-hmm.
And so with this podcast, I can actually have a conversation with somebody and be present in the moment.
Yeah.
Because outside of this podcast space,
Mm-hmm.
these kinds of conversations are non-existent.
Rarely. They're very rare, but they'll happen, but it's very, this is more in depth and more genuine and something you can like replay.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's some other people where it's like, it'll just happen naturally, but it's not forced. It's not planned. It's just, if it happens, it's wonderful. If it doesn't, it's okay. Life goes on. But like, this is actually a really, like, honestly, I would consider this more of a gift, what
Yeah.
you're doing, having people here and being able to talk through. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
welcome. You're welcome. I'm trying to think of a harder question, so hold on. But you were talking about, oh my goodness, when you're bringing up the biracial perspective,
Yeah.
it brought up a bit about my childhood as well, and I completely relate. I'm half Filipina, half white, and if you're amongst a group that's not as culturally aware, culturally perspective, you get picked on. It'll happen. But for people who embraced it, you got to see the most amazing people to connect with.
Yeah.
And, something I wanted to highlight too, it's like your amazing perspective on things. It's just keep, the strong connections with people that keep your light glowing, not less of the people are going to dim down on your attitude and your wonderful gift. And I'm just kind of curious, like, what else do you see coming out of like these amazing, authentic conversations you hold?
Thank you, Finn. You're the best. I don't know, like for me, it's learning. I'm always loving to learn more about a person's culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm finding as I'm having these conversations, there's 2 cultures out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's the individualistic culture of who I am as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the culturalistic culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found, especially in the World Beat,
Mm-hmm.
is that a lot of people have somehow or another lost their connection to their culture,
Mm-hmm.
because like I lost count of how many people. It's like, tell me something amazing about your own culture,
Mm-hmm.
and the default response is like, I don't know if I have one. And
Oh,
that was
really?
like, yeah, that was like, oof. And from my perspective, like it's interesting for me
Mm-hmm.
to be the mixed race that I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I've never really felt welcome in spaces where
Mm-hmm.
the dominant white culture was presenting things. At the same time, because I'm biracial and I present white, I'm never welcome in my own native culture as well. And so I don't have the opportunity either way
Mm-hmm.
to even connect or be involved with my own cultures,
Mm-hmm.
because both sides
Mm-hmm.
usually shun me.
Well, I'm kind of curious if the word culture is just highlighting on exterior rather than interior, right? So I'm kind of curious about, because people that you're going to generally connect with, they're going to be people with similar values,
Yeah.
welcome different perspectives. And so I wonder if the word culture can actually um, cover a little bit more that goes deeper than, oh, well, you're from, this bloodline. Is it necessarily the bloodline that's going to determine your sense of belonging, or is it really going to come from your sense of authenticity and what you can share among a group of people?
That's a fair point. And I guess the thing that keeps playing out, though, especially on the native side,
Mm-hmm.
is if you're not an enrolled member,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a different conversation.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
That's
That's
the
fair. That's fair.
that's
Yeah.
the piece where I'm like, I, okay,
Mm-hmm.
but so but I don't know, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And when you say the word dominant white culture, just for context purpose, like how would you describe that?
Yeah, so I would describe that as you would be surprised what white dudes say when there's nobody of other race around.
Ooh.
And the sense of entitlement, the racist comments, like the things that
Mm-hmm.
it's like, and for the longest time, I didn't have the power to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so now I have the power to speak up. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, really, tell me more about that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
really, you think that? Like, how'd you come up with that idea?
Mm-hmm.
But you can tell that is still a part of the primary conversation when nobody else is around.
And just for clarity's sake,
Yeah.
like what examples are you comfortable sharing?
So I'll liken it back to high school.
Okay.
Right. And there were two stories in high school that was in particular question. So like, remember the high school football coach coming up to me
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, Shawn Sullivan, like, are you related to Eric Sullivan? I'm like, yes, I am. He's like, I'm sorry. And then he said some colorful marks about him being native skin and was like, so good thing you look like you do, huh? And walked away. And as the blonde hair, blue eyed kid, like, okay.
And how old were you when he said this?
11?
Wow.
Yeah.
So that left you with a scar growing up, didn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my, and I guess is that what maybe tainted your image about where do you feel comfortable, or like who's welcoming you to which group? Is that kind of where the struggle began, or way before
No,
then?
no, I think a lot of it stems to the fact that I didn't know I was autistic.
Okay.
And so because I can't pick up on facial expressions,
Mm-hmm.
because there are certain aspects of like traditional social settings that I'll
Mm-hmm.
never figure out.
Mm-hmm.
And like always being judged on the other side too, right? And
Mm-hmm.
not fully understanding why.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back at it now, like, yeah, of course, like I don't have the same facial expressions. Like I look
Mm-hmm.
to the left when I'm about to answer a question. There are
Mm-hmm.
certain things about me when I present myself
Mm-hmm.
that are a little different
Mm-hmm.
and often misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so I remember, let me try to remember exactly this. This is one of those moments. We had this huge conference
Mm-hmm.
and we were pairing up with people,
Mm-hmm.
and it was this profound sort of like culture walk about like our whatever. And I'm seeing everybody around me in tears and hugging and having these wonderful moments. And the person that I'm sitting next to is this look of confusion on her face. And the look of her like not really understanding where I was coming from. And so here I'm looking around at all of these people who have had this profound experience. And I'm like, what am I missing here? Like what piece of the puzzle?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to have that experience. Like, I want to have that moment where you like bond with somebody for life over an intense, deep conversation. But
Mm-hmm.
every time I would try, I would leave the other person confused and bewildered. And to this day, I've never had that moment, well, outside of the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
where I have this compelling on both sides to like really want to be friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that was like growing up, even into adulthood,
Mm-hmm.
where I always just like sat on the sidelines and was like, I don't know how to start a conversation. Nobody taught me how to be polite here. Like I was missing all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
information, if you will.
Yeah. No, you're not alone. I think I learned this term fact gathering or like data gathering.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that I started to lose cues over when I was approaching into my early adulthood. And it was not so much like losing on the facial expression, but like, I really hate this expression, read between the lines or like kind of read the room. And it's like, just be direct.
Yeah.
Tell me what it is that you want. How can I help you? And Jerry Maguire, help me help you. Okay. Like that's generally how I operate. And what it also came down to was there was this really great skill I picked up on, which was like sitting with the awkward silence. Like just literally you sit there and you let them come to it and you let them come to that expression. It's like, there it is. Okay. Let's talk about that. And it's, and it's an art. I'll just say it. It's an art and it's a learned skill over time. And it also felt kind of, I don't know, to some degree, it felt like I was a bit handicapped growing up. Like you didn't know what kind of questions were appropriate, what were not. And then you learn to adapt and overcome. And learning that kind of quality, it's not for everyone. Let's be honest. That's why I'm a klutz. That's why I got good stories. But it's there's the giggle. But it's I think the beautiful thing too, it's being realistic with yourself and aware of like what you can and can't handle, and also being able to understand that not everything's going to go as planned.
Yeah.
So as much as you want to, right? It's when you act with intention that's really the drive. And it's right there at that moment, acting with intention. No matter the outcome, you get to reflect on the fact that you took that first step forward and being able to embrace that journey. And this is where I have embraced a lot of my clumsy moments because it's so awkward. It's like you didn't know any better. I mean, I get all sorts of feedback, but the thing is, I'm in my shoes going through this one motion at a time, and no one gets to take that away from me. And so that's what I kind of want to encourage you. It's that when we have that fear of like, you may not be normal. Oh, dear God, normal is overrated. Okay. It is. It is. It's because what's the realistic standard? Right. And being able to honor where your limits are and being able to communicate that's a huge win right there. And then being able to acknowledge when you can even take that first step forward, that's an even bigger win because that's for you to be able to take it. That's no one else's place to judge you. And that's what I really wanted to highlight. I just hope I'm not taking over on your
No,
radio.
you're good.
It's just,
I appreciate that.
yeah, it's just, I guess to some degree, I keep feeling like you're saying it as a weakness. And I'm like, you have so many strong qualities, sir. Let's flip the script here.
And I think it's more of like it was a weakness,
Mm-hmm.
that was sort of how I viewed it until I knew.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I had that word,
Mm-hmm.
autism, that sort of flipped the script.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I didn't know why I was the weird kid. I didn't know why I did this or why I said this or why I did this. But like now that there's this word, even though it's a barbaric sort of label that applies too loosely on all kinds of people, at least there's something there that sort of describes an experience that a lot of us have.
Mm-hmm. It
Yeah.
kind of puts some context to it,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily a label of like death, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right.
I get that.
You
Yeah.
know, and so because I mean, if someone were going to throw a label on me and be like empath, it could have a similar effect. And a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like sensitive, easy to walk over. I mean, think of all the cruel other things because it's like you feel too much, like that's kind of the negative aspect of it. But if you also think about it, empath, autism, you're thinking about, well, what are the strengths in this that you're not aware of?
Yeah.
And so it's not to put someone in their place, but it's really to be like, well, what do you understand and what do you actually have questions on? Because being able to challenge someone on what they're assuming versus what they actually don't understand, that's actually where an amazing conversation can develop, or the flaky ones can just halt. And that's okay. That's okay. That, again, exercising boundaries and letting people know, like, you're welcoming and I would love to talk to you about it. But if it's not a conversation, why are you coming at me?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
And my other weakness is I say sorry a lot, so bear with me.
It's part of my culture too. Over apologizing for things out of my control.
You apologized for trees. Sorry, I thought I hurt your feelings, and so it happens. It happens.
But I think I found a better way to sort of explain the difference, right? So I think one of the most profound experiences was like outside of high school. I was working, like jobs were scarce for me back then, and so I found myself working for a pyramid scheme where we were selling toys at discounted prices, like basically street selling kind of thing. And I remember distinctly like planning on going to certain neighborhoods. And all of the people on the team saying, well, avoid those neighborhoods because they're trouble. But then this pattern emerges. Every time I walk into the bar and I'm the only white presenting person there is this moment of awkward tension, but immediately turns into, why are you here? Welcome. Like, I want to know more. There's this welcoming environment. Every time you head into a white space that's very similar, it's, why are you here? Like, are you sure you belong here? Like, is this the spot was reserved for this or this or this, and you don't fit that mold? So are you But in spaces that are led by different cultures across the board, I'm welcomed with open arms. And so that sort of reaffirms in my formative years before I joined the military of like this idea of what I was taught growing up in this rural community that was predominantly white wasn't matching what I was experiencing all around me. And like the connection to gay was actually in high school as well. Like I had this profound experience where, because like up until a certain point in high school, like I didn't even think about it, right? It's not something that's sort of like in your thought process. But then somebody writes a newspaper article in the school paper about having to hide the fact that they're gay. And instead of conversations of empathy, instead of conversations about this or that, I'm hearing people like, oh, I wish I could figure out who it was because I want to beat him up. And that was the predominant narrative. And then somehow or another, somebody in the school paper dropped his name to the entire school body, and he had to transfer schools so that he wouldn't get beat up. And like that whole idea of having to transfer schools because of this one section of your identity, like from that moment on, I always knew that I was never going to judge somebody for that, because my thought process, how dare you? How dare you kick out this sweet kid who is pouring his heart out in this article? Is a brilliant writer and a brilliant perspective about how torture it is to have to hide this part of your identity in fear for your life. And then the exact same thing that he was afraid of ultimately caused him to be excluded from the entire community. And that's something I'll never forget. I'll never forget.
No, and I can definitely feel your empathy for this individual, and that's honestly what I keep seeing in your genuine approach with people. It's you never see just the external factors. You tend to see a core value of the individual, and you keep highlighting on it. And that's what I really love when I'm watching, your podcasts and listening to how you're talking to individuals. And it's a rare thing. And I think what I keep seeing when you're talking about someone expressing a level of vulnerability and majority of population taking advantage of it to be like expressing hate instead of taking the time to embrace the difference. It's not about, I hate to say, what's the correct expression? It's like embracing the difference doesn't mean just, like just letting it go and you being blindsided by it, but embracing the difference, it's like raise your self-awareness about it.
Yeah.
Just because this one individual student was brave enough to speak up and say, I'm gay and pouring their heart out, doesn't mean that he's asking you need to be gay with me. Like it's not a a cope, but can you take a moment to acknowledge the bravery and the moment of what it takes to be courageous to say something of that nature? A lot of people are having that tendency, and I'm seeing it in my workplace and honestly among all walks of life, where you're so used to seeing a mask.
Yeah.
And it's simply because others are either not able to embrace what's different or embrace the actual genuine side of you. Or it's just that genuine fear of like, I don't trust you. And I mean, if you've seen the things happening around, I don't blame them. I mean, I hardly blame myself because even talking at this tone is very rare for me. I'm usually a little more high-pitched customer service, okay?
Yeah.
And I love when people make fun of me for it because it calls me out on my shit. It does, but it's hard. It's hard to because then it comes down to a question of, well, how do you change the perspective on others? Is it borderline pushing others to be different?
Doesn't work.
That
That doesn't work. One of the things that I have learned over the years is the harder you push, the harder they push back.
Mm-hmm.
And I cater my conversations to those people that are willing to have them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if your mind is already made up, there ain't nothing I can say, there ain't nothing I can do, there is nothing in the world that will
Mhm.
change your perspective
Mm-hmm.
until you're ready to have a conversation
Mm-hmm.
and have an open mind
Mhm.
about your perspective.
Right.
But if you're not willing to at least acknowledge that,
Mm-hmm.
no amount of conversation is going to change them.
No.
Yeah.
If it's already concluded, it's like, well, there's no intro, so thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah. And,
That's it.
and one of my skills is being able to sort of filter that out within 30 seconds of knowing somebody. I can tell
Mhm.
within 30 seconds if I'm going to have a person on my podcast or not,
Mhm.
in just the way they interact with me in this shirt.
Mhm.
Right? If they see this shirt
Mhm.
and they see this and they see the autism in the back and they
Mhm.
still want to have a conversation, it's pretty much usually a good indication that we're going to have a good conversation on the podcast.
Mhm.
But if they don't, or they look at they're weird and they kind of want, like, I don't want to talk to you anyway.
Mhm.
And so like, even at like a farmer's market, because I
Mhm.
love going to farmer's market and seeing like if there's a vendor that I'll want to talk to.
Mhm.
There'll be some I'll just keep walking because I can tell by their energy and like, no, I can't.
It's like I don't mean to judge, but it's happening
Yeah.
just a little bit. But at
Mhm.
least you're not projecting it outward. I think that's also a skill too. It's that even if you disagree, right, there is a subtle way. You can be direct where it's like it's okay to agree to disagree.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's also just there's an etiquette around it where it's if you can't verbally express it, there's a body language you can at least still portray where it's like, it's okay if you think differently from me. It's okay if see this. I don't think of you any different because I'm seeing you as an individual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And the only thing I'm judging on,
Mhm.
point blank,
Mhm.
is if they're kind to their customers.
Mm.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's like literally the only barrier
Mhm.
because like I'll be talking to somebody and I'll be thinking about it, but then somebody else who might not look like they have money come up and you could tell
Mhm.
that this person is judging them differently.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, then I'm going to back off
Mhm.
because like literally, like, I don't care like what religion you have. I don't care what ethnicity you are. I don't care any of that stuff.
Mhm.
As long as you're kind, I want to have a conversation.
Mhm.
But if you're not kind, then that's my healthy boundary.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. And examples of
Thank you, Finn.
and I just because I'm again fact gathering. So when you say examples of kindness, like what's a particular vendor in mind that you think of where it's like this is the ideal kind of interaction I love to see?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let me flip it a little bit.
Yes,
I was
please.
just at the VA.
Okay.
Getting a medical appointment. And as I'm walking up, there's 4 veterans in line, and the person behind the counter, there's 2 people behind the counter. There's a gentleman and a woman. And as the veterans are coming up, this gentleman that's behind the counter is going out of his way to make small talk on the front end, going out of his way to sort of like kind-heartedly joke and jest, but never in a negative way. It's always like this one guy was sitting there. He didn't have to talk to this guy for 4 minutes, but this guy was obviously having some sort of a crisis and talked him into sort of taking the public transportation. And he's like, you never know. Like the bus driver could be a Navy veteran and kind of attribute it to like his time frame of when he served. And because he sort of like took the extra time to like figure out, well, based on the shirt he was wearing, he must have served in the Vietnam era. And so he likened it to being like on a boat in Vietnam. And he's like, could you trust a Navy veteran if he was driving that bus? And he's like, yeah, I think I can. And he's like, see, all of our bus drivers for the VA are veterans. So like, you're good.
Mhm.
And so like all of his anxiety about that bus ride went away. He didn't have to do that.
Right.
But he took it out of his own kind heart. It's just like that perspective to take those extra steps to alleviate the concern of somebody that served our country back so long ago. And it's moments like that that I sort of seek out,
Mhm.
you know, and because I even went up to him, I was like, you know, like, I apologize. I don't have a kindness coin with me. Otherwise I'd give you one. But like,
Yes.
I thanked him for being kind and
Mhm.
like, because you don't have to,
No.
but those moments are the ones that I cherish the most.
No, I'm gonna have to agree with you on that. I don't think I told you about my hiking trip down in Springfield.
No.
So this is one of the crazy adventures I'd been on. I have a professor, so I'm in grad school, and my professor told me you need to make sure you get out. Get out, go do something for yourself once a week. You're gonna burn out if you don't take that break. So I got a little book that shows me all the hiking spots around Oregon, and one of the spots is in Springfield, and it's called Doris Ranch. Beautiful little spot. Supposed to be a 2-mile hike. Now I'm going to emphasize supposed to be. You take one wrong turn, it could be a long walk. I wound up off of the ranch. I think I walked a total of 4-ish hours and accumulated about 6 miles. I got a good workout, a lot of time to think. And by the way, I was frustrated. We had covered 9 different theories in clinical mental health about how to, things that you could use different techniques on your client and when is it appropriate. And they were turning into a blur. Just a blur for me. And so going on this walk, I was so deep in thought, and then I didn't realize I took a wrong turn. And I actually did call my bestie because I was like, I'm lost. Can you please track me on the Google Maps and see where I am? And we found a local little tavern where I ended up having to go in and go, could you please order me a taxi because I'm lost. I don't know how to get back to Doris Ranch. And I was like, my phone, I don't know why, I can't order Uber. Thank God for this lady. She took her time, got hold of a taxi, made sure I actually got into one. The taxi driver must have had one hell of a day with me because he's dying laughing at how I took one wrong turn because he's a native in Springfield. And he goes, I've been to that part. How did you get lost? I love this question. It turns out it was 3 miles. I was 3 miles off from my starting point. And I have to tell you, in a moment of chaos, you either meet the most fantastic people that you get to connect with and have the most authentic laughs with because they see a person who's struggling, who's unafraid to communicate, and they're willing to lend a helping hand. And it was just the most beautiful interaction I've ever experienced. And then walking away from that, I was like, a couple things came to mind. Compasses don't help me, apparently. The book, I need something electronic now that's interactive because I can't read paper maps to save my life. That's not happening. And I am supposed to be mindful of that, my backpack, because I decided to make it a challenge, because why not? Extra 40, 50 pounds in a backpack, that's not ideal. Please, just spare your back, spare yourself the pain. Travel lightly. But I'd say the fact that you can even walk out of something like that and giggle about it or just reflect on even just that positive interaction, that for me just kind of restores that strong sensation of like humanity that I've been always wanting to surround myself with. And even for myself to exercise kindness, even to strangers, and to see it even come back. Like that's a beautiful interaction. It's something that I hope to keep going forward. And yeah, seeing your podcast and always reflecting on that, like that's always what I saw in congruence. And so really had to highlight on that for you. So
I appreciate that.
yeah.
Because most of my guests I meet randomly by accident.
Mhm.
Yeah, like when I Greg Bawden, who was one of my favorite interviews, a firefighter who lost 30% of his pay, even though he could do 1% less than his job because of a disability.
Oh.
And the only reason I met him is because we had a friend of a friend, and I was attending her nonprofit birthday party,
Mhm.
and I just randomly met him in the crowd, and it was like, oh, I need to hear your voice. And so it's always fascinating to me, like, you never know who you're going to meet
Mhm.
if you keep yourself open to meeting people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not like you're purposely going out there like you over there. Just come here and sit down. It's more it just happens.
Yeah.
You know, and I love that. I really do. You know, and I am running out of questions, sir.
That's okay.
'Cause I think you hit on like all the ones I've been curious about, but what else would you say you're comfortable sharing about your experience?
I guess the question would be like, what experience, right?
Yeah.
Because like, I almost look at my life as like different chapters in a story.
Mhm.
Because like I've had a wild life, and like all of those random moments where I was just in the right place at the right time,
Mhm.
where I've had these like amazing experience that I never thought possible.
Mhm.
Um, and then reflecting on that, like I remember like when I worked for that real estate development firm
Mhm.
and getting promoted as fast as I did all the way through, and then realizing two things. One, I'm making 30 to 40 grand less than my peers.
Mhm.
And two, if I would have applied the traditional way, I would never have had the opportunity to work there. And so, but for an accidental need for a part-time receptionist at minimum wage, I would have never landed there.
Mhm.
But that's sort of like the story that repeats in my life, where like I have all of these amazing jobs, but they're all by accident. And what I'm starting to figure out even now
Mhm.
is that there's this single barrier to entry
Mhm.
that is the interview, that is keeping so many people from access to living wage jobs.
It's true. Yeah, even being, let's see, when I graduated the bachelor's, 6 months is about the length of time it takes to find work.
Yeah.
And if you've done your schooling, I mean, that's fantastic. The problem is if you don't have the work experience, what are you going to talk about? So contracting gigs were kind of my starting point, and then it was the networking, was getting to know the people, and for the longest time, it was also the fact that a lot of people they don't feel confident to talk about themselves. They always say, "Sell yourself in the interview."
Mm.
The other thing I really can't stand, it's like, fake it till you make it. It's like, "Oh, dear God, don't." No. Um, be real.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what? When you're real, the chances are people are actually gonna appreciate it, and the thing that knocked the socks out of my previous manager was the fact that I advocated for myself. Before he was getting ready to offer me the job, and I had this long silence, and he's going, Are you still there?" And I go, "Well, okay, here's the thing. We had an interview where you asked me questions because we had a little technical issue. So it was 20 minutes of me being on the spot. Could I please take a moment to talk to you? I want to get your perspective. I have been burned so many times before, and I want to make sure, is this the right move? Is this where I want to work for the rest of my life and dedicate my career?" And he was so shocked and so impressed that he highlighted on the fact that I was willing to advocate for myself. And so it's, you know, the interviews can either be like a highlight of like, "Oh God, I don't have the voice," or it's a really great opportunity to try something new, to let yourself be heard. And so it can be looked as limiting, or it can be looked as a really great learning opportunity. It starts to piss people off when you start to say, "It's a learning opportunity. What can you tell me about it?" And they're just like, "Oh, you and your views." It's just
Well, and it's a little different for
Mhm.
those of us in the autism realm, though,
Mm, mm.
right?
Oh, please.
Because
Yeah.
99% of the time they're asking questions that my brain can't do.
Oh. Oh, please. What
So,
kind of examples?
every
Mhm.
time you ask that question, tell me about a time,
Mhm.
I don't have a linear memory.
Oh, okay.
So to have one time that encapsulates everything that you're after for this
Mm.
one question, I can't do that.
Oh.
And so I always liken it to like you're asking somebody in a wheelchair to walk up a flight of stairs and then do the interview. They're going to do it. It's not going to turn out well. And there's no flexibility in doing what you're doing as well. Like you can't do that sort of a traditional interview. And so I'll give you a prime example.
Yeah,
right.
please.
So here I am, the manager of instructional services. I have a master's degree, an executive master's in public administration. I applied to every single college in the United States, 4,123.
Holy cow.
Not a single one will hire me. And it's all the interview.
Oh.
Because my brain can't do the interview process.
Wow.
And so for my entire life, I have only been hired directly from a job interview like 4 times. And 2 of those were for minimum wage reception jobs. And so when I mean the barrier to entry, like I can't help but think of like Evan. Right. Evan, I met Evan like 20 years ago, like 2 master's degrees in mathematics and a PhD in physics. But because he has a speech impediment, he's pushing grocery carts for 20 hours a week.
Wow.
And this is something that happens over and over again to people on the autism spectrum.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of it deals with the fact that we're being judged on our facial expressions, we're being judged on our eye contact, and we're being judged by the manner of speaking. So it's not that we don't have the ability, it's not that we don't have the drive, it's not the fact that we would be amazing drama-free employees. We're being held to account for a process that will never accommodate us.
There is no accommodation. You have to forgive me. There's no accommodation whatsoever.
There are ways. However, here's the thing. If you're trying to work somewhere and the first thing out of your mouth is, I would like an accommodation for the interview, you're not getting the job. If you don't ask for accommodations, you're not getting the job.
Wow.
So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And that's like the only option. Like now with this, you can ask for accommodations, but yet again, the structure that's in place, if you ask for the accommodation, you're viewed as somebody who needs help doing the job. And so you're kind of sort of stuck. This whole sort of the cycle repeats itself over and over again.
And they never take into consideration about the barriers with autism.
It's very rare.
Very rare.
It's very rare. Like you have like that has a specific autism hiring program where they don't do that traditional interview. They do like a working interview. You come in for a week and you do the job for a week. And if you can do the job for a week, you get the job. If you don't, well, now we know what the gaps are and we can figure out what we need to sort of get that job. But when the fundamental structure of the job is based on a very narrow way of thinking, anybody who doesn't think or can't think in this narrow scope, they're going to struggle their entire life.
So I guess what I would love to hear, it's if you had an opportunity to revamp hiring process, what criterias would you want to implement?
I would love the interview questions to be functional.
Okay.
Asked me like the job that I have now, I got from a functional interview where here are the 6 things that always go wrong for this position. What would you do? I can do that all day long.
Okay.
But if you ask me, tell me about a time where something exactly like this happened, well, now I have to filter back through all of my memories about all of the times to find that one specific moment. But if you give me 24 hours in advance, give me those questions, like I can nail it because I found a way to accommodate my way of thinking so I can fit in that box. But the minute you ask 15 minutes or less, I know I'm not getting it.
Well, I'm kind of so I'm kind of curious. So when I've gone for interviews, I usually kept a growing list of potential questions that could be asked. Does that in any way maybe help, or is it because of the circumstance of this is the interview date, this is the list of questions, this is the time frame, like that's what starts to build the difficulty and the barrier? And feel free to call me out. I'm new to this, so
when you have extreme pattern recognition brain, trying to sort of pre-fill those sort of questions in your mind, your brain overloads and you're going to be prepared for 1,000 variations of that particular question regardless. And I don't know exactly the scenario that you're looking for at this particular moment in time. And so I can't help but filter bottom up. That's how my brain works.
Okay.
I can't take this couch where I'm up here
Mhm.
and then filter information until it fits. I have to start at the bottom with all of the things
Mhm.
and then exclude up,
Got it.
which takes about twice as much time as other people.
Okay.
And so because they don't provide that extra time or the extra processing,
Mhm.
I'm always at a significant disadvantage.
Oh my goodness. This is actually eye-opening because forgive me, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
And I appreciate how you're sharing about this because in any circumstance, I never want someone to feel like, oh, well, I have this, you're never going to understand. Just don't bother. So this really helps engaging in this level of conversation. And I guess the only other thing I could ask for is probably a wrap up note, but I want to understand what lasting impression would you want to leave? And this is just in general.
No.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, and I'm actually, I've got something in the works to sort of address this particular issue that I can't talk about right now.
Okay.
But what I can say is that my story is not unique. That statistically speaking, there's probably about anywhere from 30 to 60,000 people in Oregon
Mm-hmm.
right now
Mm-hmm.
who are stuck with part-time jobs for no reason other than facial expression, eye contact, and the way they speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not 10, not hundreds, thousands. Nationwide, you're talking about close to 2 million people
Mm-hmm.
whose one barrier to entry is this one process that everybody refuses to acknowledge or even talk about.
That's really,
And
really
then
strong impression.
if you take a step back and you look at the unemployment rate,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the part that frustrates me the most about this conversation, is because everybody says, well, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is only 8%. Here's where my question is, right? So then I did some research about how the unemployment rate is determined. It's a survey. They call 60,000 homes,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to rely on people to self-identify with a disability and whether or not they're working. It has nothing to do with the amount of people who are on unemployment. It has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with how many people apply for unemployment. It's a randomized phone survey.
Wow.
And that's how they base their unemployment rate for the entire nation.
But who's going to be that honest on a phone call?
Nobody.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, and there is no denying this.
Mm-hmm.
The minute you disclose you have a disability, you are treated differently. Not always worse, not always better, but almost 99% of the time, the moment I disclose I'm autistic,
Mm-hmm.
people view me in a different light.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always based on misperceptions, miscalculations, and all of these other things. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I have to say, I think my bestie, when she introduced me to a partner and mentioned, she's autistic, and I had no idea what it meant. I just was like, I see a person, I'm gonna treat you like a person, and I learn along the way, and that really helps because it's also like, well, what's the appropriate way and etiquette on how to address, if you have questions? Because it's like, what you don't want to.
You don't want the other person to feel tokenized.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
I hate to use, like, don't make them feel like a guinea pig.
Yeah.
Like, don't ask, like, what do you eat? Like, how do you shower? It's like, let's be more practical,
Yeah.
But then again, it's like, I guess, and this is a great time for you to even answer, like, if you don't know, what's the best way to learn?
Start with Autism FAQ.
Mm-hmm.
It's a smart read. It's like 150 pages.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most fascinating book that sort of gives you a snapshot of autism. And then if you want to have conversation with me about autism, by all means.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know anything about autism and you're relying on me to give you your introductory course, that tells me that you haven't had enough urge to know to even pick up one article or one book.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, just come on, like, know a little something about my culture
Mm-hmm.
before you ask me about my culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like, otherwise, it's kind of insulting.
See, that's what I definitely want to highlight on. It's like, where's the fine line of it's okay to ask, but then
If you're genuinely curious and you
Mhm.
know something,
Mhm.
right? But if you're basing your entire idea of autism on love on the spectrum,
Mhm.
then you're wrong. Because that's only a small curated portion of autism that's curated by a producer. And actually, let me get on my soapbox for one moment about that show.
Mhm.
Pay them. You're exploiting them. You're using them because of their disability, but you don't pay them a single dime? That is wrong, and you as producers of that show know better. I'm off my soapbox now.
Thank you. No, but thank you for sharing. And I mean, I guess back to the question of like lasting impressions.
Yeah.
You know, I really hope that honestly, lasting impression I would have to say on behalf of me, it's just keep inspiring for the change. I know it sounds very cliche, kind of like world peace, but honestly, taking the time to take a step back, reassess, and giving people that courtesy, expressing the courtesy and the patience and kindness that seems to be really limited these days. I hope that's something that I can continue to do, and I'm just really thankful that meeting someone that's genuine and authentic and just gracious with me, having me here. I'm just truly thankful. So,
I appreciate that.
of course,
And I think the last thing I'll say to
Mhm.
people listening is go out of your comfort zone and attend a cultural event of somebody that's not a part of your culture. Go attend the Filipino New Year. Go attend the Chinese New Year. Go attend whatever party or event it is about somebody else's culture and just experience it.
Mhm.
And then tell me how you feel about that person's culture. Because if you don't know anything and you've never been around a culture, how can you possibly tell me what you think about that culture?
That's beautifully said, sir. Beautifully said. Yeah, I definitely want to do that too. Thank you.
And we've been at this for almost an hour, so
Oh, wow.
yeah. Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
thank you. I'm still nervous. I'm trying to hide my hands from shaking. But no, this is definitely a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Mhm. And I hope that this inspires you to start a podcast, and I look forward to hearing your funny stories along the way.
Oh, dear Lord.
I know more than a lot of people know already.
It's going to start with I'm intact. Here we go.
And I'll end the podcast the way I always end the podcast, folks. Be kind. We all live on the same planet. We breathe the same air, and this world would be just a little bit better if we treated everybody with a little kindness and respect. Olivia, thank you.
Thank you.